If you're watching this video, then you've been scrolling through YouTube, looking for that upper hand, that strategy that will help you win PMCO and become the next big thing in the esports world. Well, you've come to the right place. Your search stops here, because by the end of this video, you will know 6 secret tips to help you succeed. Firstly, I want to talk about team roles. This method of team organization is common knowledge, so it may seem odd that it's in this video, but this basic concept is the cause of most of the struggles teams go through. I want to talk more specifically about one role in particular, and that is the IGL. A team's synergy is broken down quickest by this role, or rather, the other player's discontent with the person in that role and their decisions. Choose your IGL wisely. Their strategies should work well with your gameplay. You should all get along, they should be able to think quickly and use outside-of-the-box ideas. If you like an IGL but they would require you to change your playstyle a little, that's fine. If they're going to complete the team and lead you to victory, even if you have to shift a little, that's great. But once you've made that decision, allow them to work freely. Do not argue with them in-game. You may have different opinions on how to rotate or where to go, but when you're in a game, do not fight about it. Trust your IGL, even if you don't agree. If it doesn't work out, it's their fault. You just did your job. Fighting in-game causes disorganization, which makes a team undecided and unsure, which makes them lose the game. I would argue the #1 cause of teams disbanding or not being successful is disharmony between the IGL and the rest of the team. Trust them. If they make a mistake, allow them to learn and grow. If it doesn't work out with your current IGL, that's okay. You probably won't find the right IGL right away. But make sure you give every IGL you try out a fair chance to work and lead without opposition. Tip number 2 is knowing your team, and more specifically, minimizing weaknesses in your gameplay as a team and playing to your strengths. By this, I don't mean just get good, but rather think of ways to avoid having to play with your weak areas. I'm going to use an example from Na'Vi to illustrate this. Na'Vi are generally known as a very strong team with impeccable gun skill, but their strategies give us some clues as to their decision making. Over the course of events, we have seen several instances where they push or are pushed and lose the fight. For this team in particular, this does not mean that they aren't good at CQC or 1v1 combat, but that they can struggle when they're not in control. They falter when there are unknowns in their calculations. This could be said to be a weakness of this team. So what do? They eliminate that weakness by pushing teams away from them. By finding a position they like and keeping other teams from coming within 50 meters, they are effectively taking control of the situation and fighting on their own terms, thereby avoiding their weakness and playing to their strengths. This is what I mean when I say know your team and minimize the use of your weaknesses. Na'Vi are one of the best teams in Europe because they found a way to overcome a gap in their strategy by thinking outside the box. Team communication is one of the most fundamental and yet overlooked aspects of competitive gameplay. When you're in the middle of Zone 5 with 10 teams left and 3 of them shooting at you, we don't need number 3 yelling about getting shot or any raging when you're not. That might be obvious, but even when you're having a nice little drive down a desert road, the team has nothing to benefit from stories about your dog or your mum. This is a battleground, not a road trip. So what can you do instead? Keep your comms clear. When you need to speak, keep it short and to the point. You can either refer to one of the lists that are out there on the internet and learn those, or make a list yourself that is best for your team. Either way, learn it. Keep calm in hairy situations. No screaming, yelling, or raging. Say nothing that does not benefit the team in some way. Do what you want after the game, but in the match it's vital you as a team stay calm and focused for each other. Listen to these next excerpts from TeamSpeak to get an idea of how professional players navigate the game as the match goes on.
On your left side?
Okay,
Yeah, on my left side. Can you watch me, Mozart?
Yeah, wait, he's shooting at me. Okay, I'm watching you now.
There's one on my left side somewhere.
I'm going to Beast.
Oh, still on my right
We're
side.
on your left
anywhere.
side. I'm driving
Der muss
over.
irgendwo da sein. Der muss irgendwo da sein.
Got the guy on my right.
Did you kill them? Nice.
Knocked on the left, knocked on the left.
Nice. One
I'm
more on
gonna
this
go.
one, and then one more on the right side.
I'm gonna put pressure on the left.
I finished it.
Nice, okay. I'm just chill out.
Getting set one.
Gonna revive right now. Play slow.
Still good.
Don't get knocked. He's pushing right now.
I'm healing, wait.
He's pushing. Let's go.
One of the worst things you can do at the beginning of a match is to be stuck making decisions about your loadout. Not only is it a massive time waster, it disorganizes the team who is looking out for what you need, and it leaves you with way too many options to think about and potentially get wrong. In a professional game, you're not looting more than 3 or 4 minutes. With that time frame, you cannot afford to keep picking up weapons only to drop them in the next building when you change your mind. Instead, you need to choose 3 different loadouts with at least 5 weapons. Spend time learning the weapons, figuring out what you like, what works best with your favorite scopes and your playstyle, and what plays to your strengths. I also recommend watching Bushka's videos on weapon damage and recoil stats. His information will be invaluable to your choosing process, so I'll put his link down in the description. Stupid zones are the bane of any PUBG mobile player's existence, but they are especially frustrating in an important game. These kinds of zones are an anomaly not often found in classic matches, so they're extremely difficult to practice for. These also often happen in the last or second to last zone, throwing a wrench in the works exactly when you need it the least. So how do you navigate these zones whilst fighting off 5 teams in a small space? Let's take a look at last weekend's PMPL finals for an example of what to do and what not to do. We've got 5 teams in this 5th zone, but we're going to be looking at Eastern Stars and Giants. With this zone being stupid, UOL tried to just push into it, but unfortunately it was too open and they were eliminated en route. Eastern Stars would have seen this, and by paying attention to both the players on the ground and the number up in the top left corner, Eastern Stars knew they were in the top 3 no matter their play. With this in mind, we have 2 options, and both of these are really important to get a feel for when you are in your own games. These go hand in hand with zone prediction because both are not something you can do on paper. It's more of a feel that you start to recognize as you study the zone more. The first is knowing when and whether to finish a fight or to disengage. The second is knowing when to ignore or listen to the zone itself. In most cases, the zone is the rule, but in scenarios like this, it's more of an incentive to get a move on and make a decision quickly. Eastern Stars had 2 choices: disengage and make zone their priority, or finish the fight before the zone closed in. They decided to make the zone their priority and waited until it was moving in to push forward, intending to get at least 1 through to zone and gatekeep Giants. Unfortunately, this time it didn't work out and put them in 2nd place. Ignoring zone and instead pushing to Giants might have given them the win, provided they could muster full aggression and finish it up quickly. Both these options are valid and have their own merit, but I wanted to show you this fight in particular because it illustrates so well how a stupid zone does not have to mean you lose, if you don't panic and think carefully. Even the hardest of shifts has options, and it's your decision that will ultimately win or lose you a game. We have all heard of VOD reviews, where teams look back at their games and analyze how to improve or adapt, often in between matches as well as in between days or events. But what doesn't get talked about as much is how teams use playbacks from their own point of view and whatever was streamed during the event to study the enemy teams as well. There is so much to be learned from other teams' VODs, their strengths, weaknesses, rotation patterns, team roles, flank and CQC strategies, and the list goes on. If you're participating in an event like PMCO, you probably already have a pretty good idea of your team and your strategies, and while you should never give up doing VOD reviews for yourself as the event goes on and you progress through the stages, you need to be watching back your competitors twice as much as you watch yourself. Incorporate other teams' habits into your own rotations to give yourself the upper hand in games. Keep your enemies closer when it comes to PUBG Mobile Esports. And those are 6 ways to keep your team in the running as the competition gets intense. Remember that no strategy goes smoothly without practice, so don't get discouraged when what you apply to your gameplay doesn't work right away. Keep at it. If the pros use these, then they will work for you too. Good luck!